Hello. Thank you guys so much for clicking on this podcast today. I really appreciate it. This is with the co-founder of Ada Handle, Goose. We had a great podcast today. We talk about many great topics. One being Ada Handle. What is it? What utility does it provide to Cardano? Also, what projects are they a part of? What utility does Ada Handle have now? What utility will it have in the future? What is the comparison to .eth? Also, how are they going to plan on limiting negative words with negative connotations? How are they going to move to a decentralized protocol? All of that information in this video today and more. If you guys enjoy it, make sure you click that like button. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, please comment down below for the algo. If you enjoyed this video and have not watched my channel before, click the subscribe button, notification bell all, so you don't miss any future educational Cardano content. We've had many great people on, Charles, Ben Gortzel, now Goose, etc. If you want to support the channel, other than helping the algo, the easiest way you can do so is by delegating to Bloom. For delegating to Bloom, you actually earn Bloom tokens, Sunday tokens after the launch of the DEX, because we're a Sunday ISO pool, and also ADA. We actually minted the 8th block ever on the Cardano blockchain, so we've been here from the beginning. We'll be here till year end because Cardano will outlive us all. I hope you enjoy the video today. Hello. Thank you guys so much for clicking on this podcast today. I really appreciate it. This is the Cardano Aura podcast. The Cardano Aura podcast brings anyone on in the Cardano ecosystem that provides value to the Cardano blockchain, and it's going to be a very interesting podcast today. Today we have Goose from Ada Handle. He's actually the co-founder of Ada Handle. How are you doing today, Goose?
I'm doing really good. Thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me, Big Pam. I'm privileged.
Yeah, no problem. I'm honestly really excited to learn more. You know, Ada Handle has been making some large steps and leaps in the Cardano ecosystem as far as projects and, you know, adding utility to existing wallets and existing platforms. Real quick, before we jump into Ada Handle, can you introduce yourself a little bit?
Yeah, I'm Mr. Goose. Definitely one of the proponents of the pseudonymous economy and trying my best to keep it that way. I'm sure someday I'll have to, not. But I got started in crypto in like 2017 at the peak of the last cycle. I didn't get fully entrenched into it until 2020. When lockdowns happened and I had nothing else better to do. And then eventually found my way into Cardano. And from there, just started soaking in as much, information as I possibly could. And for some of the OGs, me and Calvin, who's another co-founder of Ada Handle, started the Crypto Drip. And the Crypto Drip was trying to be a blockchain-specific media source. So we would write our own pieces about Cardano and other blockchains and economics, so on and so forth. But since we started that, like the learning curve to Cardano, I peaked and I started soaking in so much knowledge, and with that became sort of like a beacon for the community to learn and, to interact. And since then, it's helped me to understand and develop avenues for building certain products that I think are very valuable now and hopefully into the future. And that kind of laid the path for me and Conrad and Calvin to start pushing Ada Handle the way that we have. And yeah.
Well, that's awesome. And, I really see how efficient it can be, trying to educate other people and, how that would lead you to your peak of Cardano knowledge, because it's not only you, researching information, you also have Calvin and, surrounding yourself with people that are trying to educate others while also educating themselves. I feel like nothing can be more efficient as far as, pushing you down the learning journey of Cardano. But
definitely.
What is Ada Handle for someone that's never heard of it before?
So what Ada Handle's prerogative is to establish a new standard of transacting value over the blockchain. We're starting on Cardano, eventually going to move to other UTXO blockchains. But what the goal is to take the cryptographic string that we currently use to send and receive payments over the blockchain and map that to a human readable address. So for instance, instead of sending you Big Pay an NFT, I wouldn't send it to, ADDR and then, 29 alphanumeric characters. I would send it to cash tag, which is the precursor to a handle, or the prefix to a handle. I would send it to cash tag Big Pay. And then all of the back end will take care of mapping that to you or your address, and then you'll be receiving whatever I send you. So it's basically just reestablishing a computer-specific standard to a more human-readable standard. And we believe if we successfully do that, it would pave the way for, bringing in more people into the blockchain who find it less intimidating.
It's almost like usernames on the blockchain.
Yep.
I work with a lot of people setting up wallets and having them withdraw from the exchange for the first time or sending them an NFT. And the ADDR1, the receive address, really is a disconnect between new users and the blockchain space. The long, hard to read, hard to honestly verify. It really is a big disconnect. So I see the value that you guys are providing. So
Right.
Is Ada Handle a Cardano NFT?
Ada Handle is indeed an NFT, yes.
So I also wanted to ask you, what other blockchains are you guys planning to move to, specifically UTXO, as you mentioned?
So there's a few actually. Our next venture for sure will be Ergo, another UTXO blockchain who I think also has EUTXO structure, the extended version. We're already kind of in research mode for that and figuring out ways to make that possible. Some other blockchains are Nervos, Topple, Digibyte, blockchains like those. But the strategy here is entrench ourselves in a more niche side of the entire crypto industry. I think a lot of products and value comes from the account model from Ethereum and forks of Ethereum, and who therefore have the same model, and try to bring ourselves into the UTXO world. That way, at some point, we'll have strategically positioned ourselves to end up partnering and collaborating with those other naming solutions. So at some point, there will be some interoperability play over all of the blockchains. But it's definitely one. It makes sense on an architecture and infrastructure build out level, and two, it makes sense on a business strategic level for us.
That makes sense. A lot of people that I've talked to, they believe that the future will be an internet of blockchains. And, the reason for that being the different utility that different blockchains provide, whether that be better security or higher TPS, or what you guys planning or on building, if technically possible, is allowing one username for multiple blockchains. So for example, we're going to talk about this later, but you guys did an initial, beta sale of 15,000 NFTs on the Cardano blockchain. Will you essentially redo that sale on Ergo or these other blockchains? Or will that name, essentially the cash tag handle? So for me, it would be like money sign, big pay. Could that eventually work for multiple blockchains, or is it going to be essentially a new name scheme for each one, to where I would need to purchase that on Ergo and then also on Cardano because that interoperability is not there yet?
So earlier I had said we were planning to move to Ergo, and we were in research mode. One of those things that we're, thinking about, talking through, researching is how to start that interoperability bridge over to Ergo. And that's definitely one of the questions, right? Like, there are some hundreds of quintillions of variations of handles that exist, and we don't want to create separate versions of that every single time we move to a new blockchain. We'd rather it be, cohesive. So figuring out a way to do that is definitely on the chopping block for us. But but yeah, that's definitely our goal. There's all things like, sub handles and augmented handles, and which are things that are, you know, in the build out process that will eventually come to light to the public. But we're definitely scouring through all of the different possibilities to try and make it as cohesive and interoperable as possible.
Awesome. I appreciate that. Can you explain what a sub handle and an auto handle is? I've personally never heard those two terms.
So, at a really layman's term for this, so a sub handle would basically just be, it would be similar to a subdomain. A subhandle would just give the opportunity for some entity to mint their own handles on their own domain. So, for instance, we're partnered with Giro Wallet, right? Like Giro Wallet could have their own minting mechanism through the handle domain, and mint subhandles. So it could be, with a prefix GW or hashtag GW underscore, and then whatever their user wants to have. This would be a good use case for something like World Mobile, who has, a very defined, once they establish themselves in Africa, they have a very defined set of users, and they would benefit very well from using subhandles. So that's what subhandles are. Augmented handles, we're still building this out. It's definitely in idea phase. But would just be the ability to send your handle to a smart contract and add the necessary augmentations via the metadata, and for whatever specific use case that a protocol would need, and then receive that back, and then you can use that handle in whatever augmented fashion you need.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. And I definitely do see the utility of both of those. The first being, let's just use World Mobile for an example. They plan on connecting the unconnected, and that's not just in Tanzania. That's in many countries in Africa. But there's going to have to be, different wings, that accept that. It can't just be, one person handling 10 countries in Africa. There's going to be different wings accepting payments, and I could see how having sub handles for different wallet addresses would be useful. I personally have a lot of different wallets for different utility, for different use cases. So, to me, it makes perfect sense that, having those sub handles, and also the augmentation, that makes sense. I've seen a lot of creative NFT projects kind of go back and forth on that augmentation idea of, upgrading NFTs. And, I can see the utility that would provide, because, I bet once people get their own handle, I actually had one sent to me. And
Nice.
I could see that, wanting to augment that, whether you guys have different, parameters that you could change, or, different sub handles. Like, I could see how the value would be there. So thank you for that. I appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. I think one of the some of the cool things we're trying to build out is, we try our best to be as censorship resistant of a protocol as possible. So allowing as many user choices as possible. And what that looks like is some people can, yes, go out and mint different variations of protocol names. We have definitely done our due diligence in reserving those names for protocols, for instance, Liquid Finance and other big projects. But people will find a way to mint a certain variation by adding a full stop or adding an underscore, so on and so forth. So, the next question becomes, okay, what's the possible attack vector here? And how do we prevent that? So augmented handles could at some point provide a verification layer. And we could have a verification system set up so that a handle has some sort of physical identifier that shows that it is verified in a trusted source to interact with. So that's going to be a very interesting avenue to go down, and hopefully something that community can get behind and respect, because I know that this, the current scamming that's going on, like just in the protocol or just in Cardano alone, is kind of insane.
Yeah, it is. One thing that kind of, makes me think of that is, the verification would be important because, even my YouTube comment section, There's something on YouTube that allows you to remove certain comments if you put a word in there that's not allowed. So, for example, I'll put in WhatsApp, because that's where most people are doing the scamming. Well, they get so creative with how they spell out WhatsApp and distribute the numbers with different characters and carets and underscores and hyphens that, I can have 200 words limited and they still get through, so I could see where having essentially a blue check mark next to the big pay handle or the world mobile handle, would stop a lot of people, from, sending to the wrong address or getting scammed.
Exactly.
So, if you're in the Twitter space, which most people in crypto are nowadays, you see a lot of .eth handles or .eth domains, as they call them, on their Twitter names. Is there any, similarities or differences or nuances between Ada Handle and .eth?
So this is actually a pretty big conversation we've had in the past, and we've actually I actually was on a couple of calls with one of the founders of ENS, Brantley, and we've talked through this a couple of times. The reality is, this new paradigm that we are building, Web3, shouldn't have a defined avenue for naming solutions, right? Like, ENS is successful. They were the first to provide a naming solutions in the form of domain names, but that doesn't mean it's the one that's the end-all version of a naming solution that can be successful, or even what's best for blockchain technology, right? So defining a naming solution that's successful doesn't have to start at the domain level, which we haven't. The cool thing about handles and the cool thing about the Cardano blockchain is that each handle is native to the Cardano blockchain. So it starts almost as at the base level of the chain, right? And so if we entrench a standard via free market, right? We didn't go the CIP route. If we do it via free market and we entrench a standard that everybody, respects and abides by, we've then created an identification layer at almost ground level. And the layers you can build on top of that can include things like domains. So you can build that, as a composable layer. So it's just, in our point of view, is building and establishing a standard at the very base layer and building on top of that. So at some point, yeah, we could definitely take the route of going through domains, or the domain route, and that's where we could see some possible interactions and interoperability with ENS, and even unstoppable domains.
Yeah, for sure. And the way that you guys designed Ada Handle does speak to that. It's layer one, and that can only be done on Cardano. For
Right.
people that don't know, Cardano native assets, NFTs, they're all layer one. You
Right.
mint them with the protocol by creating a transaction. You're not using any layer two contract, and you can't do that on Ethereum. You would have
Right.
to essentially build that layer two.
Right. So the cool thing as well, like a part of that, an extension of that, is because handles are NFTs, right? You own them. The user owns them, right? On ENS, they're domain names, and they interact the way that you would interact with a Web2 domain name. You pay rent on those, right? You don't technically own those. So on ENS, let's say, years into the future, right? Like let's go into the metaverse world, right? Like, let's say you're playing a World of Warcraft version of the metaverse, right? And you're some prolific character, and you're using your .eth name or your handle, right? And you're some amazing PvP player, right? Everybody knows you. Only the handle user will be able to extract that value via monetary means and be able to sell that, or like I said, extract that value. Whereas in .eth, they don't own it, right? Like, as a handle owner, there's history to your name, and there's data that proves it. And I'm sure at some point, like, blockchain games will have history run through those names, and you'll be able to see verified history within each handle. And only a handle you can extract that value, since you actually own your name and you own the value of that name.
Yeah, that's it's very interesting. I've never thought about that. For example, I have, multiple domain names at this point, and I do have to pay rent on them. And there really is no ownership, to them,
Right.
because I have to keep paying that. Whereas, an NFT in my wallet, no one can take that from me unless they have my private keys.
Right.
So that is a very valuable nuance, I think, and I appreciate that. So what does this look like from the user perspective? We've already mentioned it a little bit, because we stated that it's an NFT. So then, for users that don't hold any NFTs on the Cardano blockchain are just sent to normal addresses. The ADDR1 address, the same way that you would withdraw ADA from an exchange, you can get sent an NFT from one of your friends or from a centralized website, and then you have it in your wallet. So, once we've gotten that out of the way, people understand NFTs. What does the NFT look like in their wallet? And then how does a user actually, benefit from having this Ada Handle NFT in their wallet?
So, again, I can't remember if I mentioned this off camera or on camera, but a lot of the way that handles are integrated into specific protocols fall onto the protocols themselves. So how it would actually look on a UI and a UI UX perspective would be up to the protocol. I can only speak to the ones who we've seen integrations already, which would be Nami Wallet and SundaySwap. Nami Wallet would be the one who's running currently on mainnet, and basically the asset lives in a part of the wallet or the address attached to the wallet. And within the search bar, when you send, you can either type in the address of the person you are sending an asset to, or you can type in their associated handle, and the back end of Nami takes care of routing your payment or your asset to that handle owner. And that's for a wallet, right? So if you look at SundaySwap, if you participated in the SundaySwap testnet, they had a cool surprise for everybody where they had handles integrated into their front end. So, that's just a UI perspective change, right? Like, you log in and you want to do some swaps on SundaySwap. Instead of being identified by a moniker of, alphanumeric hashes, you're identified by a moniker of your choosing, right? Like, your handle is displayed in the top right, and it gives you a sense of personality, a sense of self. And so we'll be able to see, as more protocols go live on mainnet, we'll be able to see and interpret all sorts of different variations of how the handle standard is entrenched, which is super exciting for us. But how a user interacts with it will be mostly up to how the protocols themselves integrate us.
Awesome. So currently, the main two working integrations are the Nami wallet and SundaySwap.
Right. So SundaySwap, because they're on testnet, they're moving to mainnet soon at some point.
Yeah. But the mainnet Nami, let's say I want to send Goose. You better have that cash tag or I'll be
I do. I have it reserved. I haven't minted it yet.
Okay. Awesome.
The only one I minted during beta sale was Maverick, so I can have the Goose and Maverick
That's awesome.
handles. Yeah.
So if I, open up Nami right now and I want to send you, say, a space bud, I can just type in, cash tag Goose if it were minted, and then that would send it to you.
That's literally it.
That's pretty convenient. So
like
although it hasn't been integrated, on other services yet, what partnerships are you most excited about? Because I've seen a lot of them. I saw Cody. I've seen more mobile. I mean, you guys are. That's why I said making big leaps around here, because you talk to everybody.
It's true. I've definitely made the rounds and met a bunch of cool and just interesting and ridiculously smart people. Dude, Cardano is just teeming with absolutely mind-bending smart people. It's crazy. 2022 is going to be a good year. Anyway, partnerships I'm most excited about. I don't know, dude. At least from the lens of entrenching a standard in a free market sense. I'm excited for all of them. I want more. I want more people to find utility. I want more people to find convenience. I want more people to see, like, what a human version of a name looks like on the blockchain. So I'm excited for all of them. Specifically, I would say because of their size and where they're at in a business, Cody is going to be a lot of fun. World Mobile is going to be a lot of fun. We've talked about some really cool stuff that we can do. I think we like integrating with the wallets for sure. We definitely like integrating with the wallets because that's kind of it's an important focal point on the blockchain for sure. So yeah, I would say those.
So what wallets have you spoken to in any confirmations other than Nami?
So what we've confirmed so far is Nami Wallet, Giro Wallet, B58. That might be who we've confirmed. I know.
CC Vault?
CC Vault, yes, you're right. You're
Hell
right,
yes.
CC Vault. Love those guys.
Yeah.
And there are a ton more in the pipeline. Some of them, they just don't have the bandwidth to work on an integration right now. Some of them have to jump through a bunch of legal hoops to, get documents moving forward. But I can assure you there are some big names and a lot of people who are requesting on Twitter to see those big names. We are working with them. And we are trying to come to a middle ground. So
really what you guys need, for that integration is users. And I would say that you're doing very well on that so far. In the initial beta sale, which I'm going to ask you to tell us about in just a second, you sold 15,000 NFTs, and I'm sure there were some duplicate users. But, once you have 15,000 people that all have your product, they're going to want places to use it. So I'm sure they're adding, your Roy Wallet on Twitter and saying, hey man, when are you going to add this?
Yep. It's very true. It's very true. Yeah, we like that. So think about it. Like, you bring up a good point. If you're a user of the handle and you would like to see more utility with it, as a user of the community, you have a ton of saying power, right? Like, the more you push to see an asset be integrated onto a protocol, the more likely it's going to happen, right? Like, so yeah, I would say to the community who's listening, like, the more you want to see it on something, keep putting your voice out there. It works. We've talked about it many times when I've jumped on calls with, other founders of protocols. Like, it works.
Yeah, Goose won't say this, but I will. He stated that some of the wallets, there's a bottleneck in integrating it. I mean, it's so easy. You query the policy ID, you get the staking address relative to, the token that you're querying, and then you just match that with any of the addresses under the staking address. I mean, using DB Sync, that is a very easy process.
That's pretty much it, man. Like, it is a very hands-off integration. The biggest, the biggest design part of that would just be figuring out how you want to place it in the UI. Like, integrating it, I would say, is an easier task. So.
Yeah, and you're right. And whether you separate that from the normal address right. But actually getting that address, I would say, is relatively easy because we have the decentralized database that is the blockchain that does all the work for us, right?
Exactly.
So, well, we really explained. I was going to ask you, how does it technically work when sending a TX, but I think we just explained that pretty well.
A very simple way for sure. Much simpler than I think people are thinking.
So can you explain the beta sale that you guys did and kind of, the story behind that, the process, etc.?
Sure. So, to really give you the whole picture, we started this about, 5 or 6 months ago. And, as new founders on Cardano, we definitely made some blunders for sure. The biggest of which we had given ourselves a hard date to launch our initial beta sale, right? And obviously, with any software project, hitting those dates are very tough. And we put ourselves through a ton of stress trying to hit that date, and we didn't. And we pushed back and we pushed back, and eventually there was no more room to push back on. And we had to launch, and that was back in October. And we ran into issues, and the beta sale was technically a flop. And I'm not scared to admit that. That's what happens in many startups. So we went back to the drawing board. We hired some talent.
What specifically made it a flop?
So, not to get too deep into the technicals, we're basically using a third-party API, and we're also using Firestore. Firestore is known for not being able to handle a ton of load in a single transaction, and we were packing transactions with information. So we basically just had to abstract that for ourselves in the database and utilized Firestore kind of in a nuanced way. I know there are other projects who reached out to us who are like, yeah, dude, Firestore is not. we had to move from Firestore, right? So we just had to figure out a way to stick with that database and abstract some information out of each transaction to make it more scalable. But that was it.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
So right. So that kind of flopped. We went back to the drawing board. We hired talent, and we picked up 2 new hires, 2 absolute rock stars of some engineers, who's actually my dad and his best friend. And they've been coding for decades. So we started making leaps and bounds of progress.
It's pretty cool though to hire your dad. Hey, I know you taught me a lot about software development, but you need a job.
He already has an amazing job, but definitely we're definitely aiming to get him full time on Cardano for sure. It definitely took a while to sell him on the whole blockchain thing for sure.
Yeah.
But we're getting there, man. We're close. So anyway, we build up and we lead up to the beta sale in December. In our eyes, huge success, right? Like, there were no double mints, there were no duplicates, there were barely any refunds, and it was all automated, right? We didn't have to pre-mint anything and drop them. It was user comes into a payment session, pays, gets their handle, boom, they're out. Like, it was an automated engine that ran just as smoothly as we built it. The only optimizations, though, and they're strictly optimizations, which were queue system, right? So the way that we look at it, right, we would say it's a resounding success on a minting engine. It is a failure on a UI, in the UI perspective, right? So what had happened is during the beta sale, we had, I think, some 30 to 40,000 unique users hit our site. We had, at peak, about 12 to 15,000 unique users in our queue. Each person could mint 9 handles in a 30-minute session. So, you do the math, there's tens of thousands of handles would have been minted. We only allowed 15. And our queuing system was built in a way to protect the blockchain, right? And, we find that to be a very, selfless cause, right? Like, even look at, what Ardana had just posted. They have a product they said that they can launch in a couple weeks, but they're going to hold off because they need to wait till there's a more scalable solution on the Cardano blockchain, because they don't want to put their users in a potentially damning situation because of network load, right? So our job as, an NFT project, or anybody's job as a protocol, should do whatever they can to preserve as much space in the network for other people to utilize it. So that was kind of our mission, was to make sure that we had a minting engine and a queuing system that could provide that for us. Now, we actually built, I would say, both of those in tandem, a very good product and a very good system. What we didn't account for was the massive spike in demand and that massive spike in load. And what that looked like for end users was they were waiting in queues, like for almost 19 hours or something like that, with no idea of where they are in the queue, with no idea when they would receive their access link via email. So for a lot of users, it was a very frustrating and upsetting experience, because we just didn't account for that massive load, which, you know, it's definitely on us. But we have, like, from a software perspective, we have a completely working product that is, it's the first of its kind, which is a super cool it's a super cool thing to have built. Now all we have to do is build out optimizations to aka make it more scalable. So one, the queuing system is more of a friendly experience, right? People will be able to know exactly where they are in line, so that they can potentially, you know, set up a time or set up a schedule or set up an alarm and put on their phone like, hey, 6 hours from now I'll receive a you know, whatever. We'll increase our payment sessions. We'll decrease the amount of handles people can mint, and we'll increase how many handles can be minted in one transaction. So aka trying to become as scalable as possible to move that queue system as fast as possible. One thing that we did notice was the chain held up really well during our beta launch. I think at max, before, at the same time we were doing our beta sale, Equine NFT also did their drop. Before they did their drop, which was at midnight UTC, I think the max we hit was like 92% on the blockchain, which, you know, was quite a bit of load. Yeah. But it did much better than we thought. So we can actually pick up how fast we're minting things and how many people are able to get into a session to pay and mint. And hopefully that'll scale and move the queue along faster.
So you essentially set up, you know, your minting process to limit, you know, minting relative to the chain load. Yep. So that other users on the blockchain, you know, wouldn't be limited, you know, by your guys' TXs.
Exactly. Like let's paint this picture, right? Let's say if we didn't do that, right, and the blockchain was at 100%, like, dude, there were still 12,000 people who still needed to mint, unique individuals who still needed to mint, right? If we just let all those people through, the blockchain would have been at, you know, 100% easy for an extended period of time, right? Now let's say at the same time, if there were other protocols on mainnet, let's say SundaeSwap, for example, and there was somebody who was doing an important swap, who, you know, was a large percentage of their personal portfolio, and that transaction failed, or that transaction, you know, messed up in some different way because of the network load, that would be on us, right? Like, because we weren't being selfless, you know, stewards of the blockchain.
Yeah.
So, and that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, and to paint another picture, I actually know a guy. He told me about this situation where he was, you know, providing liquidity somewhere, and he was very nervous about that at that point. But it was while everything was crashing, so he actually had to add more collateral so he wasn't liquidated from doing that. And then on Ethereum, you know, the transactions, once you start to reach that load, you know, you have to pay more and more money to make sure your transaction is queued. You know, it's essentially like an auction for transactions. Yep. And he went to go, you know, provide more liquidity so he didn't lose his full collateral, which was tens of thousands of dollars. The TX fee was $1,600 to provide more liquidity, or he lost his tens of thousands of dollars in collateral. So, you know, what you're stating is true, you know, especially as people use Cardano for financial services. It's important for protocols and people building to think about the chain load and essentially, you know, I don't know, it's just like being good to the environment almost, you know, make sure that you're good to everyone else around you, you know. Right.
I mean, and, you know, there are also ways for different financial protocols to build out their product on the architectural level, to not be so dependent on the network. I think that was one of the biggest flaws with MakerDAO and Ethereum, was the way that they had built out their vault and auctioning system was very network dependent, which led to some, you know, pretty massive tears in their architecture, and people lost hundreds of millions now worth of ETH.
Yeah, a good example of that, of designing, you know, your software with the protocol in mind is, what SundaySwap does with scoopers.
Yep.
Essentially they have
Exactly.
SPOs that pick up a bunch of different TXs and then submit them all in one TX. Another good example of that is drip drops. Drip drops, what they do is they essentially wait every minute and collect all of the drops and try to put as many of them at once in one transaction. We were doing some testing before launch, and we all did like 3 or 4 drips at the same time, and those 3 or 4 drips all were submitted in one TX.
Dude, yeah, I saw Rick's post. That transaction was huge.
Mm-hmm.
That was awesome.
Yeah, and that's and you mentioned your guys' mistakes, but that's all a part of being a part of a new blockchain and learning and growing as a company and growing as a community as well, because the mistakes that you made, especially when you talk about them publicly, people can learn from those.
I think, to kind of piggyback on that idea, right, is like this whole Web3 movement, the difference between Web2 and Web3 is now you have an extra class of investor, right? You have the founders, you have the shareholders, and then you have the community, right? So what that should look like on the founding side of a company is, because you have 3 different parties that you are accountable to, you should also be accounting for the community. So in our perspective, right, like, what does a community want? They want transparency into what the company is doing. They want transparency in what the company has done. So being, one of our missions was to be as transparent as possible, which is a tough thing to do, right? Because a lot of times you need to protect the integrity of the company. But it is our prerogative to be a part of this new Web3 paradigm and be a company that isn't as shelled off and walled and opaque like a Web2 company, and make sure we're as transparent as possible and accommodating to our community, right? Because at some point, they're going to be the ones who own the protocol, all right? So
yeah,
again, to piggyback back off that idea of, the community is definitely something we take special care of.
So stating that, and that really leads me into a good question that I didn't have written down. You stated that the protocol will essentially be in the hands of the community. Obviously things have to start centralized. Cardano is inherently centralized as it moves towards a decentralized blockchain. How do you guys plan to do that? What does that process look like? I know it's, kind of far away.
It's definitely a long process.
But
yeah, it's definitely a long process. If we just look at the roadmap of ENS, I've been studying that very in depth of how they went from, where they started from, and then to their token launch, and how they've been facilitating the governance side of their tokens and their protocol and their DAO structure. So it's going to be a while. Like, for instance, all of our bandwidth is spent right now on those optimizations for public sale, on some R&D for how do we become interoperable in the most efficient way to other UTXO chains, getting out reserved handles in an efficient manner to all of the SPOs and protocols that we've reserved for. At some point, we'll be able to scale out horizontally, hire some talent, and then the officers can talk more about how we take this protocol, or I would say how we take this company and move it into a protocol at some point. So it's on the roadmap. Just it's very loose for now.
It's one of the hardest things possible to do.
Definitely.
I honestly can't think of anything harder.
It's literally just going to be studying other people's paths and mistakes and triumphs and making sure we're putting out the most efficient way to do it as possible.
Well, and hopefully as Cardano grows and, Project Catalyst transitions into Voltaire, we'll actually have governance as a service on Cardano.
Wow, I didn't even think about that. That would actually be super cool.
Yeah, that's the goal. You see a lot of people now, because we don't have Voltaire, you see a lot of people building out their own governance services, but, the initial design for Cardano was governance as a service. Earlier we mentioned how Cardano is a decentralized database, and that makes it easy to distribute NFTs or distribute value. But, the distribution of governance is in one of Charles's core designs, and it's actually what made me interested, because I can see for entities or for DAOs or for whomever, governance as a service is a utility for those entrepreneurs or for those entities. And it's I really do look forward to that day.
Oh,
that we have
totally
that
agree.
ability.
I think out of the five, you know, build out periods, Basho, Byron, Shelley, so on and so forth, the Voltaire is what I'm excited for most, and I think in the long run will be the most valuable.
Yeah, me as well. I mean, that's really what made Cardano stick out for me. You mentioned you joined in the 2017, era, and I did too. I found out really about it 2016, but really, in the weeds 2017. And as soon as I heard about Voltaire, and another thing, we already talked about layer one and how NFTs are layer one. Well, Voltaire is, supposed to be layer one, so you're going to have governance as a service built into, the layer one of the blockchain, which is pretty nuts.
Yeah, I think, yeah, we could have we could spend the whole day talking about the cool stuff on Cardano.
Yeah, for sure.
We'll leave that for another time.
Yeah. So I got another question for you. Will certain negative words be removed from Ada Handle? For example, words with racist connotations or cuss words, and where are you guys at on that?
So, if you were around a few months ago, we actually held a poll with our community to, again, subscribe to being as transparent as possible to see what they thought about censoring restrictive words. The vast majority, because of the ideology that exists within our industry, within the paradigms that we are trying to foster, have chosen to not censor anything and to let it be completely free market, and mint whatever anybody wants to mint at will. I think people got a taste of that during the beta sale. There were some mints that, we don't agree with, and we've tried our best to secure those on chain, and we would certainly appreciate there being some sort of community-led effort to, bring those off of the chain. Like, we heard of some cool ideas, like starting up or minting a handle, called a black hole handle, and people could send money to that handle, and then that could be run by a DAO, and then the DAO could go and purchase on the secondary market any handles that that could be a cool free market approach. The reality is, after we've got a taste of what that looks like, we are internally restructuring some of those decisions. I think we're going to lean more into whether it be to the community's likes or dislikes, lean more into the centralized aspect of being a starting company, and make that decision, which would be to try our best. I mean, these things are nearly impossible to do, especially when you have a new concept like NFTs. Like any other Web 2 service, you're talking emails, Twitter, where you can where you can create unique usernames. Those companies have the right to revocation, right? So if you bend or break their rules, there are moderators who can reach out and take that back from you, right? Because you don't own that. Whereas on the blockchain, once they're minted, they are out of our control power. We have zero data, we have zero knowledge of who owns that, why they own it, and they own that completely. And we can't get that from them unless it's their user decision to give it back to us. So it makes it a tremendously difficult task to bottleneck those things from the start, especially when you're talking about language. Like you had said, I believe it was off camera, there are thousands of variations to a single string that can bypass a system like this. And because there are no moderators, and we don't own any part of this protocol, there is no way we can revoke any of what's minted. So we haven't decided yet, but what we're trying and pushing for is to try and be as stringent as possible on the mint side of things. And down the road, as we talked about earlier, is as we move towards a DAO structure and a community-led protocol, we build in an avenue so that it would just be turnkey for the community. If they decide through the DAO that they want to release and make it free market again, we've already built out the infrastructure for them. All they need to do is turn the key, and then the protocol will be able to mint. So we're trying our best to solve both sides of the equations here. Yes, I think we're gonna take a centralized approach, and we're gonna decide that these names shouldn't be out there for a various number of reasons. But at the same time, we're gonna build out what's necessary for the community at some point to make the decision, if it be their decision, to let those words be in play and allow them to just turn the key, and that'll be it.
That's fair. Yeah, I from my perspective, and I voiced my opinion a few months ago, but I it's really from my experience with YouTube. You guys have probably seen them in the comment section down below, but there are a lot of scammers named Big Pay out there.
Right.
And I've tried to ban all of them. I've tried to ban the words that they use, the phone numbers, Telegram, everything. And it is just impossible, and while you guys can limit the word boobs with zeros because that's a common one. There are going to be a million that you can't think of. But I honestly see exactly where you're coming from. As a centralized company, you have the ability to remove those, and trying your hardest in the beginning to do that until it is a decentralized, autonomous organization. Then it's on the community to decide.
Yeah, I mean, that's the tough part. Like, you say millions, I say hundreds of millions, and that it's the reality. And
that's just in English.
And that's just in English. And I've scoured the internet I've scoured Stack Overflow. I've scoured different AI services that could be of use, and it's just so nuanced of a problem to solve. Like, I don't even think the big company like Google and Facebook can solve them, because, and if they've done a very good job, their saving grace is the fact that they're a Web 2 company and they own everything that's created. Like, because we don't have that luxury, our job is way harder to keep those off of the blockchain. In fact, it's nearly impossible.
Yeah. And you can see that by the Web 2 companies that do own everything, that do have the ability to remove everything, that they still haven't solved the problem yet, let alone this hybrid model that you have now where you're trying to move to a DAO, but you're starting off centralized. If they haven't solved the problem with, all of the money and all of the, the years of history, I doubt that. It could be easily solved by, you guys just starting out. It's a complicated problem.
It really is.
Just like moving to decentralization, it's definitely up there. So we've had a great podcast today, I must admit. Is there any questions or anything you want to get out there before we head out of here for today?
I think I covered pretty much everything. Those questions were really good at prying out all of the information I had for everybody. Yeah, I thank you very much for bringing me on, Big Pay. I'm definitely honored.
For sure. Yeah, it was an honor to meet you as your Anon, and I'm excited to meet you in person at the Rare Bloom.
Yes, that should be something I want to get out there. If you want to meet me in person, I will definitely be attending the Rare Bloom event in Colorado, October 13th, 14th?
14th and 15th.
October 14th, 15th, 2022. Ada Handle will have a booth there, I think alongside Liquid Finance. Was Sunday Swap Coin?
Yep, Sunday Swap. And we also just confirmed Singularity Net with Ben Gertzel.
No way.
So, yeah.
No way. So you'll be able to meet the real Goose. You'll be able to meet Ben Gertzel, Dwayne Cameron, Mateen, Pi.
Rick's also coming too.
Yeah.
It's gonna be a blast, man. I'm so excited for it. I really am.
That's so awesome you put that together, dude. I'm super excited.
Yeah, me too. I went to the Bitcoin conference and I just realized like this kind of sucks. It's not my friends. It's not people I want to see. It's just like Max Kaiser up there, yelling.
Oh my God. I was like,
exactly. I'm like, this needs to be done for Cardano. Imagine if it was Dwayne Cameron up there.
Oh yeah.
But thank you guys so much for tuning into this podcast today. I really appreciate it. If you made it all the way till the end, please type #Goose in the comment section down below so we both know you guys made it till the end. But thank you guys so much. I really appreciate it. If you did enjoy it, as always, do the usual shill algo stuff. Like the video, comment, subscribe, notification bell. You know how it is. So
thank you guys. Everybody. Thank you very much, Big Pay.